2021. And please all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. All right, so moving on to that's the agenda. We got a really lengthy agenda, but let's move on to number 2, approval of the minutes for the June 8th, 2021 and June 14th, 2021 special meeting. Can I get a motion?
Oh, second.
Okay, any comments, changes, questions? Nope. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, okay, it's passed. Okay, next item on the agenda is for Selectmen's update. I'll do this real quick. The first thing, which hopefully a lot of the members of the public got the Madison alerts about, our special parking policies for this weekend. We're trying to cut down on congestion at the gates this year, and we're really asking people to buy their beach parking stickers or daily resident parking passes in advance. We will not be selling them at the Surf Club this weekend, so people just need to plan ahead, and this will help stop backups at the gate. And you can buy Monday, well, starting today through Thursday at the Surf Club as usual. Friday, we're trying a new location just to keep traffic away from the Surf Club, because that's also the day of the fireworks. And so you can buy them at the Visitor Center, which is the Chamber of Commerce office also, from 8:30 a.m. until 12 o'clock on Friday. At that point, the Surf Club is probably going to be full anyway. So we figured we'd stop selling passes at noon on Friday. If you're a Madison resident, though, you can purchase a seasonal sticker online at home at your convenience, and then print out your receipt or put it on your phone and bring it to the gate to show proof of that you purchased a beach sticker. So there's really no reason that a Madison resident shouldn't be able to have easy access to purchasing something over the weekend. But if you're having guests in town, buy those daily passes now. And so there's going to be a lot of other things happening at the gates. We're actually going to be monitoring Lowry Field, and we'll have somebody stationed there throughout the weekend. So in order to park at Lowry Field, we're going to use it for parking, but we're going to acquire either a parking pass or a beach sticker. And we're also going to be manning the gates on Friday, which is the fireworks, until the fireworks start. I think historically in the past, after 5 o'clock, it was kind of a free-for-all of who could get into the Surf Club. And so we're just, if you want to park at one of the beaches for the fireworks, you've got to buy a parking pass. The town will still be running those free shuttle buses, though, for people who don't have parking passes. And they can park at Stop and Shop, the 79 commuter lot, and the train station lot. So there's still other options, but in order to get that kind of premium parking, you need to have your parking pass purchased and get there early to get a spot. So more of this is available online under, I put the website link at the bottom of the slide here, but if you go to the town website page, it's pretty prominent. You can get information on all the different policies that we'll be having for the weekend. A couple other things I just wanted to talk about. And I think the board is going to be tackling some of this in July. We've got 3 potential future referendums that we've been talking about quite a bit over the last 12 to 18 months. And we started 2 of these in motion back in 2020. The Board of Selectmen in February 2020 had actually adopted a timeline to take both the Academy School and the Madison School Renewal Plan to referendum. And then COVID kind of hit, and there was a lot of uncertainty about if it was the right time to take such a bold initiative to the public. And the board actually rescinded that timeline and put it on hold to revisit in 2021. So now we're here in the middle of 2021, and the schools have, a month ago, came and presented to this board and talked about how they want to move forward with that timeline. And so I think it's also time that we start talking about Academy and what we envision for that and the timeline for that project. And then also we have an outstanding RFP for Island Avenue, which was a process we also started in January 2020. And that, after a year with the Island Avenue Commission, we launched an RFP several months ago, and we're expecting proposals by Wednesday of this week. So I'm going to ask the board to meet for a special meeting to talk about all 3 of these referendums and what we envision for timelines going forward. So we'll look to schedule something in July to talk about that, because it's a lot of big important issues, and we need to start thinking about how that's going to work and relative to the 3 different projects and what status they are at this point. So that will be in July. Just wanted to give a quick update on the Ethics Commission. I know Erin and I have been working on that. I actually started revising the policy. We were trying to set up some other meetings with other towns and had some difficulties, unfortunately. I'm finding that sometimes ethics committees haven't met for years. So it's been tough trying to actually locate somebody to interview. As we had already met with Guilford, which is a very active commission, but other towns maybe not so active. And I also wanted to wait because we're going to be appointing a new town attorney, and so I thought it would be better to have that new town attorney get involved as we revise our policy. So that will continue to pick up again in July, and hopefully we can have something for the board soon for approval. And then I just want to do a final congratulations to a number of our employees who are retiring as of July 1st. We've had a lot of experienced seasoned personnel. We offered a early retirement incentive program earlier in the year, and they've chosen to move on and enjoy their time as retired employees. So I just want to congratulate Barb Saviston of the Beach and Rec Department, Scott Erskine, Tim Ward, Mary Hobray, Val Soul, and Bob Gahuli, who will all be retiring as of July 1st. And especially Scott Erskine at 42 years with the town. We've already had a luncheon, and he's going to be staying with us for part-time over the next year, but just somebody who's really built that department, and also Barb who built our after-school program. And then one other comment I did want to make is we also have another employee, which I'm not sure if he's on right now, but just that who's going to be moving on to another opportunity, and that's Dave Anderson. Who's been an exemplary employee for us, and he's decided to just pursue a new career in the nonprofit world. He's worked for us for 9 years and has brought a tremendous amount of professionalism, fortitude, creativity, and success with his many roles in land use. And I just want to congratulate him on his new position, and we're thankful for all his efforts to make Madison a better place to live. So that is it for my update. And I think the next is for liaison reports and selectmen comments, and I will stop sharing the screen there. So any liaison reports or selectmen comments?
I would make one. If you look into the screen, it's so funny not being in the room. We had the opportunity to raise the pride flag this morning. As a board of selectmen, we read the proclamation and raised the flag. The wind was sort of not helping us out, but the flag did start to wave at one point. I think it was a beautiful ceremony, talking about how inclusive Madison is and what a wonderful community we have for everyone. And I was really proud to participate as a board member representing all of us. And it was wonderful. So I'm really proud to live in our Madison community.
Okay, great. Yeah, it was a great ceremony this morning. Had a nice crowd and just very uplifting.
It was nice. We're going to hear later in the agenda, the EDC has endorsed 2 projects for the tax abatement policy, so we'll be recommending that onto town meeting tonight. And this is a relatively new policy that the EDC crafted 4 or 5 years ago, and we're now starting to see the fruit of that work. We've got 2 projects in town that want to move forward and meet the criteria, so that will be exciting for us. I think it's starting to get the word out there that Madison really does want to see responsible development that is going to make a positive impact on the community.
Nothing for me.
Yeah, okay, great. Anybody else? Erin?
No, thank you. And good evening, everyone. Sorry I'm late.
Great. Okay.
I like the ambiance back there though, Aaron, with the egg, the green egg. This
Got a
doesn't
little
suck,
outside
right?
time today. I've been inside all day, so.
I love it.
It's a little cooler now at least, so, all right,
Definitely.
moving
Beats my
on.
office.
Yeah, moving on to citizens' comments. Are there any citizens' comments? So we have Lauren, just so you understand, Catherine Hunter just raised her hand, so I'll have her. Catherine, if you could stand up, and I think we forgot how to do citizen comments so you can be, you're gonna just film her? Okay, perfect.
Yeah, Catherine,
Say
talk to
your
me.
name and address.
Catherine, talk to me, not them.
I will. Catherine Hunter, 31 Scotland Avenue, a resident of the town and here in my individual capacity and also on behalf of Save Academy, a grassroots organization. I'm here tonight to advocate for a referendum on the Academy Community Center. I'm encouraged to hear that it's part of the list of upcoming items in a special July meeting. I want to take just a couple of minutes, because I know you have a packed agenda, to remind folks of how we got here. It's been 17 years plus since the Academy building was closed. I believe it was closed in 2004. $50,000 or more, dozens of studies, reports, surveys, committees. In fact, I think we may be on our 5th committee right about now. Hundreds of volunteer man hours. I believe we're in something like a Groundhog Day-like cycle where every 3 or 4 years we bring this before the public and we're ready to go to referendum and something happens, there's a change of administration or something else happens, things go quiet and we slide all the way back to the beginning again. Right now, I don't know if anybody's been following the online chatter, but there's a lot of confusion out there and there's a lot of misinformation. And I think that we need to try to get a handle on this, and I'm urging this administration to do it. I'd like to just remind everyone that the Great Blue Poll was the most comprehensive and independent survey of public sentiment in over 14 years. The results of both the random, representative, scientific phone poll and the online survey were close, consistent, and clear. Both of those vehicles made it clear that the only option to receive majority support was the community center. Following the poll, and on the basis of the poll, the town appointed the current, and I may have this wrong, but I believe it's the Academy Community Center Design Committee. And they were appointed to flesh out the concept, the pricing, and the details. And they did it. They did a wonderful job. They worked very, very hard. This committee has not only added flesh to the bone for the design, bringing in architects and preparing concept design plans, but they've also dug into the cost to renovate. They doubled down on the Collier's estimate and the budget for the cost to renovate. And they even came up with a model for how to make operations self-sustaining. The project deserves a vote, an opportunity for residents to decide if they will spend taxpayer dollars to renovate this building for community purposes. I believe we were poised for referendum, requiring probably just only the public information rollout when it was interrupted by a change of administration and then the pandemic. And we understand why things went quiet during this period. I'd like to say this isn't a partisan matter. Democrats have long supported Academy and community use for Academy. Bruce Wilson was the architect of the Great Blue Poll and the committee that I sat on that ultimately brought us the community center option. Because of the lapse of time and the interruption of the pandemic, the public is confused. So I'd like to urge this administration, both Democrats and Republicans, to work together to provide leadership on this and usher it forward to referendum. Last point is, this is a personal and editorial comment. I'm a little fearful if that you bring this to referendum under the weight of 3 or 4 projects, it will sink because of sticker shock. So I hope it can be given a fair public rollout, support by this administration, and a standalone referendum. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Yes.
Hi, I'm well lined up for this. Hi, Heather Crawford, 553 Summerhill Road, and current chair of the Conservation Commission. I'm on my way down the hall to our own meeting tonight, and I wanted to stop in and give a quick update. Because before Dave left us, Dave Anderson, he asked if the Conservation Commission would be willing to spearhead getting Madison recertified through the sustainable CT thing. And we have been working on that. And we've realized that there are a lot of things that where the Conservation Commission has made great steps forward in the new materials that have been requested by Sustainable CT since we were last certified in 2018. One of which you may have noticed around town campus, we've started an anti-idling sign program. And so we're posting signs in various areas where commission members and others may have noted people sitting in their cars for long periods of time running their engine so that they can charge their phone or keep their air conditioning or their heating on, depending on the season. And so at various town parks and ball fields, and when school starts again at schools, we will be popping signs up for 20-day periods to remind people that it's not only hurting their kids and the planet, but it's against the law to idle their engines. So those are up, we're starting those. We also have a various other things that we're working on, but I wanted to come in tonight and say sort of to anybody who might be watching that there are a lot of areas of the Sustainable CT program which are not in the Conservation Commission wheelhouse. And so we're looking for people to volunteer to come in and help us with things like creative arts in the community, reducing energy efficiency. We have various people that have already been working on some of these things, but we could use some more volunteers. And I'm going to be putting a letter in the newspaper and on patch as well. But I thought since I was walking by, I'd stick my head in.
Right. Perfect.
Okay. And reach out to me, because there was I found out there's one of the things that we've done that might qualify.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Okay.
so
So I'll talk to Lauren and set up a meeting.
okay, great. All right, thank you.
Yep.
Hi,
Anybody,
Heather.
since there's no other public that
We do have one
member.
member.
I'm staying on mine though. There's no one in here that needs to ask me to speak.
Hello. Hi, go ahead and state your name and address for the record.
Hi, I'm Catherine Ciotti Lynch. My address is 99 Harbor Avenue. I am calling in today. I just learned about this agenda. So it's just last minute. So excuse me if I'm sounding not fully prepared, but I have grown up in Madison my whole life, and I'm almost done raising 3 children here as well. I am a cannabis advocate, and I am calling not just for myself, but several other residents who did not have time to prepare to call in or attend the Board of Selectmen meeting tonight, but who would like me to speak on their behalf as well as mine, and to say that we request that you can quickly and efficiently make a decision on forming a panel of stakeholders that can give input in regards to how we can have Madison be inclusive of those people who have cannabis businesses in town. There are several. And also people who live a cannabis friendly lifestyle. Now with the upcoming adult recreational legal use, it's a topic that does need to be addressed and cannot be delayed any longer. And also we'll be forming an official coalition soon. So we will be having these discussions this year. We would like our leadership of our town to take the lead on this. So we have that support. And it's really just about forming a coalition of residents and taxpayers that can weigh in with and give our input and work together with the town to come up with a plan.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, any other public? Lauren?
Nope, that's it.
All right, great. Well, thank you very much. It's our first time we've had in-person public comment and Zoom public comment, so it's working so far. All right, so moving on to our business tonight. First item is discuss and take action to move the regular meeting of the Board of Selectmen from July 26, 2021 to Monday, July 19, 2021 at 7 p.m. Any motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any discussion or?
Is this just to accommodate a normal schedule?
Yeah, just scheduling accommodations, and we also had to worry about the town meeting, and we didn't want to leave it till the end of the month, so we just thought it was better to move it up a week, so. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, great, all right. Number 7, discuss and take action to approve a special appropriation request from the police department in the amount of $19,000 to fund the special duty pay account pending town meeting approval.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Is there anybody here to talk to these, Lauren?
No, but these are routine. We do them every year. It's already been approved by the Board of Finance, so it's just awaiting your approval and then town meeting.
Yeah, okay.
So Lauren, is this just the moving of overtime due to the special assignments for utility companies and that kind of thing?
Yeah, it's that end of the year OT that we do that I think comes back in revenue.
Right, and so just so people understand, we don't forecast or budget for revenues, we only budget for expenses. So we incur the expense of the overtime, and then we have a revenue account where the contractors have paid us, and we just move the money from one account to the other. So it's something we do at the end of every year.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, great. Discuss and take action to call, and this is where I think I need to amend the motion, right, on this?
Yep.
Okay, actually, I need to use this one. There was a couple of typos in this. So, discuss and take action to call the annual budget reconciliation town meeting on Monday, July 19, 2021 at 6:30 p.m. in town campus room A for the following purposes. So the first one is a special appropriation request from the Public Works Department in the amount of $600,000 to fund the major roads paving account. Number 2 is a special appropriation request from the police department in the amount of $19,000 to fund special duty wages. And number 3 is other special appropriations as deemed necessary. So this is also a typical meeting that we do every year to close things out. And then the $600,000 special, actually, should be asking for a motion. All right, well, yeah.
So moved. Second.
All right, great, discussion. And then the $600,000, we'd actually approved that, as well as the Board of Finance had approved that. So this is just the next step in the process of having to get special approval at town meeting for the special appropriation. So any other questions on that? Nope. All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, great. All right, moving on. Discuss and take action to approve hiring of Jonathan Walter to the position of civil engineer in the Public Works Department. The position is non-union, rate of pay is grade 7, step 3, $28.28 per hour. The position is budgeted, not requiring appropriation of funds. This position vacancy was created due to a reorganization.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any further questions? This is what we went through the budget process and approved. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, great. Discuss and take action to approve moving Austin Hall to the position of Director of Beach and Recreation. The position is non-union, rate of pay is grade 18, step 5, exempt. The position is budgeted, not requiring appropriation of funds. This position vacancy was created due to retirement. Position description and salary reviewed by the Job Evaluation Committee during fiscal year 21-22.
So moved. Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, great. Congratulations, Austin.
Just wanted it out there for a
Maybe
minute.
not
Lot of
congratulations.
controversy, Austin.
Beaches, so, all right. Discuss and take action to approve moving Heather Noblin to the position of Assistant Director of Beach and Recreation. The position is non-union, rate of pay is grade 13, step 4, exempt. The position is budgeted, not requiring appropriation of funds. This position vacancy was created due to retirement. Position description and salary were reviewed by the Job Evaluation Committee during fiscal year 21-22.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And just so the public understands, these were all part of a budget that we went through in nauseam, I think, so this is just the final process of approving it. Discuss and take action to approve the hiring of Tim Lund to the position of Deputy Fire Marshal in the Fire Marshal's office. The position is non-union, rate of pay is grade 8, step 3, $30.42 per hour. The position is budgeted, not requiring appropriation of funds. This This position vacancy was created due to a retirement.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. Okay, we're getting towards the end here.
We're cranking here.
I know. Well, we've talked about all of this in the budget. So discuss and take action to approve the hiring of Matt Quattrano to the position of Recreation Supervisor in the Beach and Recreation Department. The position is non-union. Rate of pay is grade 6, step 4, $29.02 per hour. The position is budgeted, not requiring an appropriation of fund. This position was vacancy was created due to a reorganization.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, great. All in favor? Say aye.
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 All right, moving on. Discuss and take action to approve accepting Connecticut DOT local bridge program grant funding for the replacement of a bridge on Garnet Park Road over Bailey Creek and for the rehabilitation of the bridge on Flintlock Road over Huzzle Guzzle Brook in the amount of $914,375, which represents 50% of the total project costs, and to authorize the first selectman to sign the same.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, and just quickly for the public, this was 2 bridges that were in CIP, and we had applied for grants to pay for half of them, and now we actually received the grants. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, great. All right, next item on the agenda is discuss and take action to award the RFP for legal services as follows. Bertha Kalina as town attorney commencing July 1st, 2021. Shipman and Goodman as labor attorney and bond counsel commencing July 1st, 2021. Milano and Ornat as assessment attorney commencing July 1st, 2021. And Bertram Moses as land use attorney commencing July 1st, 2021.
So moved. Second.
Okay, and just for the public, we decided to review all our legal services. The last couple of months, we put a panel together and launched an RFP and came up with a selection. In particular, I just want to highlight our new town attorney would be Carrie Olson of North Carolina, and she represents more than a half dozen towns in Connecticut. She's got a lot of experience. She's also a general counsel to CCM, so we're excited to tap into all her knowledge and expertise. Any other questions? No? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, great. All right. Discuss and take action to approve accepting a grant in the amount of $5,000 from the Irwin Bauer Charitable Trust to be used for a habitat exploration program at Bauer Park, Rockville Reserve, and Saltmeadow Park.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, and this is just a grant we go for every year, and it helps fund these programs at Bauer Park. Over the years, we've seen actually this reduce quite a bit as they broaden out through this trust to tap into other opportunities in town to fund things, but the town continues to get some funding for this for our programs, which is great. Any other questions?
No.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, so you're up. All right, so moving on to the next 2 items have to do with the bill that was literally signed, I think, last week, legalizing adult recreational marijuana in our state. And so that's going to raise a lot of conversation, I think, in our community about how this is going to work within the town and how we're going to address, implementing a lot of the new rules and regulations. So we thought we'd start off with Catherine from Youth and Family Services to talk about the bill itself. So Catherine, I will turn it over to you.
Sure, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you guys for having me. So naturally, we spent a lot of time tracking this bill and seeing how it's going to impact, especially young people in our community. I will say, after listening to days of testimony, I had to give the Senate 3 times vote on this, and then the House had to vote on it. And those hearings went until 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. So we've heard a lot of both the good and the bad. Like any bill that's passed, there are things that aren't ideal, but there are some good things that are written into the bill. I know one of the things that we were really kind of happy about was that they did put in some restrictions in terms of like social hosts for marijuana use for underage people. That's something that we were very serious about when it came to alcohol use. I was actually a student when I worked on helping to write that bill for alcohol use in the early 2000s. So I was glad that they included marijuana on that. because there was a lot of, especially at that time, a lot of people hosting parties and kind of turning a blind eye and allowing things to happen, but not having any accountability for what happened. So we were glad that marijuana was included in the social house law. Overall, so everybody knows once July 1st comes, the bill is going to allow anybody 21 and older to have an ounce and a half on them, an ounce and a half of marijuana, and up to 5 ounces in their locked glove compartment, their locked trunk, or their house. So it's a pretty sizable amount. It's also going to go into effect in different stages. So not everything is going to do like sweeping legalization all at once. We are going to, they're saying that they're going to aim for retail shops to be open around May of 2022. And on July 1st of 2023, we're going to see the homegrown aspect of this bill come to life. So that will allow people to have 3 mature and 3 immature plants in their house for an individual, or up to 12 plants for a household. So it's really interesting to see how that part gets kicked in. There are municipal impacts for this bill. So one thing that's important to know is whatever we do as a community, effective July 1st, if 10% of the voting population decides that they definitely want retail stores, then they can create a petition. If they get 10% of the voters, they can petition the community to have it go to referendum on whether we have retail shops or not. So that's something we're always going to have to kind of pay attention to and get a pulse of what the community is saying and what they're thinking. There are certain zoning restrictions that allows municipalities to amend their zoning regulations so they can prohibit them from opening. They could reasonably restrict their hours or their signage, or they could restrict their proximity to religious organizations, schools, charitable organizations, and things like that. So I think so, it's a lot. It's a long bill, and it's funny.
It's only 300 pages.
It's 300 pages, and believe it or not, the summary of it is 180-something pages itself. So we're joking that it's, I mean, some legislators got that like a day or two before they had to vote. Some got it that morning, so they kept changing and tweaking things. And it's so long that I had asked Scott for permission to print it out, so it's like, this is really lengthy. Is it okay if I just eat up all this ink because I want to take notes on it?
It's a ream, no,
So I did make double-sided copies, so you guys know. But I did opt to print the bill and not this bill and the summary because it's lengthy. So if we were to restrict or ban retail marijuana shops here, it's not something that's unheard of in other states. We've seen that too. Massachusetts, the majority of their towns are opted out of having retail stores. 71% of Colorado opted out of having retail stores. So you hear a lot about Colorado, but a lot of it's focused on cities like Denver. I know at one point there was a statistic that there are more marijuana shops in Denver than there were Starbucks in the entire state of Colorado. So you can see how things can pop up quickly, but there are provisions in this bill that would prevent that from happening because it's based on populations of 25,000 at a chunk. 67% of California opted out of having stores. So again, we see communities kind of struggle with the decision of whether we're going to allow it, whether we're going to ban it. The interesting thing here is if we do open up to retailers or micro cultivators, we can charge them up to $50,000 to go towards public safety in the first 30 days of it being open. So it is something that we can, if we were to go forward, we can, charge them that much. It would go back mostly into the police department to help with things like traffic control and stuff like that, and making sure there's adequate surveillance of what's happening. We can also restrict cannabis use, mostly in public. That would apply to municipally owned property, but also property that we as a town control but we don't own. The interesting thing about that is they included tobacco use and vaping in that to kind of broaden the Clean Air Act and where we can restrict certain usage. We could, as a municipality, if we were to do that, charge up to $50 per individual for violating that, for up to $1,000 for a business. And that would include restricting outdoor use for restaurants as well. And there's also a 3% tax that we can collect if we were to have a store here. So when we open a retail store or anything else, if we were to go that route, there would be the 6.35% sales tax charged for the product, and then another 3% charged on top of that, that we would have to kind of go through this process of going back and forth with the Department of Revenue Services to collect that amount after everything's been invoiced. So in terms of, things that we would be, just so you know, the 3% is, you have a restriction on what you can spend that money on. So it's mostly going back to education, street signage, cleaning up the community and stuff like that. For penalties for sale to an underage person, there is a section that covers sale to a youth through a retail store, and that's a Class A misdemeanor. But there's also a section that covers not just sale, but giving marijuana to a minor. And the interesting thing about that section, and it's something to kind of keep our eye on, is it applies to anybody over the age of 23. So it seems like kind of a loophole there, where if you were 21 or 22, you purchased it legally, you could give it to somebody underage, and you wouldn't be violating the law, but they would be violating the law. So as a minor, they would be charged if they were caught. But it seems like a weird loophole. 23 just seems like a strange age when it's 21 and over for a purchase. So the bill does have potency caps, which is something we were really concerned about. For dried flower or plant, it's 30%. For some of the concentrates, it's 60%. Those are still pretty high. We'd like to see it a little bit lower, but it's what we have. It's also important to know that that does not apply to the pre-filled cartridges that somebody might vape. So there are no potency caps for those. Somehow it was kind of left out of that. There are advertising restrictions. There's a lot of different pieces of the bill. It's long. And, like anything, when it came up, we were worried about what impact it would have on our young people. So it's something that we looked at other states for seeing, what's happened there. One thing that we're always concerned about is typically, like any substance, to track underage drinking, tobacco use, prescription drugs, you name it. When we see an increased access, when we see a decreased perception of harm, we see increased use. So it's something that, we're familiar with, unfortunately, as a state. We saw decriminalization in 2011. We saw a medical marijuana program in 2012. So these are conversations that our young people have been hearing all along. And interestingly enough, when you go back to even our earliest survey data in 2006, marijuana is the only increase that we've seen in substance use in that time frame. So that's actually gone from, here in Madison, 16% to 21%. In the same period of time, we saw underage drinking come down from 43% to 34%. We saw tobacco use, not surprisingly, that came down. That dropped from 14 to 3%. And then, of course, prescription drugs, we saw a decrease from 6 to 3%. So it was kind of the only one that stood out. But again, they're getting a lot of information about, and I think it's safer than other substances. So it's something we need to continue to look at, to educate our young people and educate our parents about too, especially when it comes to the higher potency cannabis products that are going to be available. Again, just educating people about even parental disapproval, because that's come down over time. So more young people think that their parents would be okay with them using. I think, we have a generation that's so in tune with youth mental health. It's important to talk about that and the impact that marijuana can have on youth mental health, especially with the higher potency cannabis products that are available. And there's always going to be a concern too about the black market sales. So that's something that we've seen in other states. We have seen them actually increase. There's a theory that it's already out there, so let's regulate it, and it'll, help protect more vulnerable populations. But because it's taxed and because you allow homegrown and stuff like that, we have seen the black market actually thrive in those conditions. So again, it's something, we've learned a lot from other states, so something to be aware of and to keep our eye on and make sure that we're doing everything we can to protect our young people and our vulnerable population. And it's I could be here all night talking about this this thing, and I won't keep you guys here all night. So I don't know if you guys have any questions. I think it's gonna be really important to address this as a community and to work together to figure out what this is gonna look like. And also, once it starts unfolding, keep that line of communication open and say, hey, this is working really well, we've noticed this problem, and go back to even consumer protection as they tweak these regulations to say, these are the challenges that we're experiencing. And we really want to do something about it and safeguard our community.
Hey, Catherine, can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
Good to see you.
You too.
So obviously, as the Youth and Family Services liaison, I've heard a lot of the dialogue directly about this in the context of the board. And the board actually took a pretty, important stance pre-passing of this bill. But can you talk a little bit about marijuana as a gateway drug and just what the current thinking is and maybe the perspective of our local community?
Sure. So, this is a really interesting topic because I think a lot of people kind of view it as, if you're responsible, you're using it over 21, it's no different than alcohol. I think a lot of times we have to think about the higher potency products too. We're not talking about what people would call the Woodstock weed, which was 1 to 3% THC. In other states, we've seen concentrates that can be up to 99% pure THC.
Wow.
Luckily, we have a cap for a lot of that where it can't be over 60. But even comparing 60 to the 1 to 3% that people were used to, it's a big difference. There's no question that marijuana addiction is a thing. It's been proven, it's been added to the DSM-5. We know that addiction and heavy usage is a problem. We're concerned about the impact it has on the developing teen brain because that continues to develop until you're 25. And again, we're still trying to gather research on the higher potency products because they're fairly new. We didn't have that back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and even into the early 2000s. So it's kind of similar to vaping where we're like, geez, what kind of an impact is this going to have on the brain 20, 30, 40 years down the road? Because we don't have that data yet. Yeah. So something we need to continue to track, but there is a concern about the higher potency products and it kind of bringing on more of an addiction and a heavy usage because people get dependent on that feeling that they're getting because it's much different than you would with the lower.
And want more, yeah.
So let me ask you, so right now there's no federal regulation because it's an illegal substance. Right. So a lot of this would be normally addressed at the federal level, right? Where they would put standards in and they would create, some sort of regulatory environment that would cross. So each state is kind of on its own right now about deciding what potency levels, all this other stuff. So, is the assumption that everything that's sold in Connecticut is grown in Connecticut? Does it have to be a homegrown? We can't go to Massachusetts and come here and sell it, right? Right. So the idea is that we're going to have our own cultivators and growers here. Right. They'll manufacture the product and they'll be sold and used here. Because you can't do it across state lines right now because it's federally illegal. Right. So, okay. It doesn't mean it's not available. Oh yeah, no, I'm just looking at it. If you're in an industry, you have to develop your own sort of supply chain, right? Yeah. And you have to grow it in Connecticut. Right. And that's one of our concerns is we know it's already so available for young people. And we do a lot of presentations where we talk to parents about the seriousness of even social media. And we've been able to go on and purchase vape devices from TikTok. No ID required. Go on, I can click, disguise it so that my parents can't see it. I'm old enough to have it. I still clicked it out of curiosity. And I was able to get a vape pen shipped to me in a Cracker Jack box, labeled Stuff Cosmetics, so that my parents would have no idea what it was. And once we went through that process, we're like, I wonder what else we can get. And within not even 30 seconds of typing in, and I'll be the first to admit, as much as I try to keep up on all the child lingo that's out there, and I just age myself by saying child, but all the kids, there's so many terms that are coming out so quickly that just within a matter of seconds of typing in edible plug, I was able to get countless videos where they'll ship across the nation
all I need to have is a prepaid debit card or credit card or gift card or access to somebody's debit card to have these things shipped. So, I mean, it's already out there.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot with a lot of things too also, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
The internet is kind of just
Pills, you name
created
it.
a free marketplace that is really hard to control.
Yeah.
Well, I think the purpose, and I appreciate you walking through all that, because the bill is sizable. And I think, some people have followed this debate very closely, others haven't, and I think it was a little bit of surprising when we went, oh my gosh, we're talking July 1st, like by the end of this week.
Yeah.
You can actually, it's not like a year away, I mean,
Right.
in terms of people can actually possess, not purchase, but possess and legally, and we're not that far from 2 states that it is legal, so I think that was a little kind of like, okay, this is a little bit maybe faster than we thought, and so, it is important that the board starts thinking through, the town does, a number of different things, and so maybe with that, we can go on to our next, you're welcome to,
Absolutely.
sit down, but be available for questions for our next agenda item.
I have one question.
Yeah.
What does the statute say to the private business owner or retailer about their right to regulate use on their premises?
That I'll have to check. It's somewhere buried in here, I'm sure. But there are certain provisions in there that protect workplaces in terms of testing. I mean, you're always gonna have industries like construction and people in the CDL who or anybody with a federal contract who obviously can't test positive, because federally it's illegal. But I think, there are certain provisions in there that would allow for use to happen controlled, but it's not public. So I think it would depend on how it was done. But the other, I mean, the penalties for violating some of these things aren't large. I know, especially.
That's an understatement.
Especially when it comes to, like, if you compare underage alcohol use to underage marijuana use, if you're caught with alcohol underage, you get a $136 infraction. So you actually have an infraction, it goes through the court system, you get your driver's license pulled for 60 days.
It's actually maybe even longer than that. It's considered a DUI, even if you're not in a car.
Right, so if you're not licensed, you have to wait an additional 150 days to get licensed. Again, if you're nowhere near your vehicle. For marijuana use, they left in the 60 days, but they took away a lot of the penalties that would trigger that from happening. So now if you're caught underage for marijuana use, you only get a written warning and possible referral to your youth service bureau. If it's your second offense, you get a referral to your youth service bureau. By your third offense, you're an adjudicated delinquent to the court system. But the trick is going to be tracking those written warnings because they don't get entered into the system like an infraction would.
Wow.
And those are triggered by quantity. So
Right.
that underage person with less than the ounce and a half
Right.
specifically can't be arrested.
Right.
Specifically, they have to attest that they understand that marijuana is bad for them.
Right.
And they're supposed to pay a fine unless they self-attest that they don't have the money, and then the fine is waived.
And yeah, so it's a lot different than alcohol. With alcohol, you get the infraction and it goes through the rest of the system.
And we were talking today that, a lot of the alcohol laws came up through preventing driving, right? So you can see the way the laws have been set up, to kind of control that issue. It was kind of a reaction to that issue with mothers against drunk driving, whereas this is a very different thing, and how it's, getting, probably 5 years from now, they will have experience, and then they might end up amending or changing one.
And it's tough because for this, we're relying very heavily on drug recognition officers for detecting DUIs. Because the driving force of this law was more on social justice and not fixing our state budget, less of the conversation was about the monetary factor, and a lot of the money gets diverted into cities that have been impacted by the war on drugs, and there's some money that goes to education. But, in all the other states we've seen, they've underperformed in terms of what they thought they would get in
For revenue.
for revenue. I mean, there's a single state where it comes from more than, like, the highest is Colorado, and it's 0.9% of their state budget.
Wow.
So we're not seeing the revenue come in that we thought we would. So it'll be interesting, but, you know, with the driving focus being on social justice and reforming social justice, they've taken things out like detecting the smell of marijuana isn't a reason to search a car anymore. So you really can't do anything if you pull a car over and it smells like marijuana. So it'll be interesting to see how that impacts our impaired driving laws.
Catherine, what was the reason for it not being similar, if not exactly the same as alcohol use? Is it just the data that we just don't have enough data on it? Or, I mean.
I don't know the answer to that because I know all along in the process they said they wanted it regulated like alcohol. I know just on the alcohol side of things, because I was the young person that was involved with helping with the state law, we were very careful to craft that so that it was viewed as an infraction, so that it wasn't leading to a kid having a long, lengthy arrest record, but there was some sort of a penalty that would kick in. So I'm surprised at the route that they took, but I know that, again, a lot of it Madison isn't really a driving factor for how they crafted it. They're thinking more of like New Haven, Bridgeport, and other communities, so.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, I mean, as Catherine has shown us, there's a lot to unpack
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
this document.
Yeah.
And right, wrong, or in between, I think what's in front of us is that work to figure out what it means for Madison. And
Yeah.
we're already hearing the sort of the full spectrum of opinion on it, which means that I think we're in for a robust conversation in the town. And I think our next steps really are facilitating that conversation and making sure that we've got everybody represented. I think the one thing I would say to you is, independent of that work, I hope that you folks are working on the public education component of it, because we are going to find that this is going to start to be in houses where it wasn't before. There's a whole group of people that said it's illegal, I'm not going to do it. Now that it's illegal, maybe I'll try it.
Right.
And we want to make sure that young parents, old parents understand what this means in their house and what it, just like they should be locking their liquor cabinet, right? Just like they shouldn't be leaving their cleaning supplies out where children can get at it. They need to be aware of that there's a responsibility that's going to come with bringing this into the house, and certainly that's right in your wheelhouse.
Absolutely, we've already started thinking about it.
Yeah.
And thinking about educating young people and parents about what this means, what it looks like, and I think there's gonna be a lot of education going forward, particularly around developing teen brain, which will have to make it fun and exciting for kids.
Well, yeah, I mean, there will have to be a lot of education, Bruce's point, and then also just preparation and, from a town standpoint about enforcement, policies, at our facilities. I mean, the bill does address some of that, and it does give the town some leeway on this. But, I think it's gonna be a discussion topic that's gonna really touch most pieces of town government in some way. So I think it's really important we start talking and discussing about this. I've tried to put up some of the dates that we need to be conscious of, being that we are able to do some regulation even starting in October, that we can regulate this type of activity. And the retail sales, obviously, that's the earliest, but then we also, you can only have one anyway, in towns of less than 50,000 through June 2024. That gives, not that, it's a thought process that we can go through. It's not like we're gonna be seeing, just as many hot shops as liquor stores in the next 12 to 18 months. And also the personal use. I mean, that's gonna be an interesting discussion. We have some time on that before that's gonna be allowed. And I just also, the people's records are gonna be cleared. I mean, mean, I think that's something that's a benefit that came out of this, right? Some people that really suffered because of the more stricter laws that were out there, and this is allowing people to have a fresh start, have a clean record. You know, I think that we do need to put a task force and who those stakeholders are. I just listed more town government type functions that will be impacted by this, but we have to figure out a way how to engage the community also, and get their input and see what people think in this town, because to be honest, I don't know what the temperature is right now. You know, it's all over the map. I don't think it's political one way or the other. I think it's really, or age even, it's really, I think you don't know where people come out on this.
And
So
I think our state legislators were a good example of that. They were split themselves. We had our state senator vote no and our state representative vote yes.
yeah,
Not a decision that people made lightly.
yeah. So,
So given that some of these dates are coming
Yeah.
sooner rather than later, maybe for the July meeting, we target formally putting that ad hoc committee together. I think I would add on there an advocacy group. I think it's a valid perspective that needs to be part of the discussion. So I think their voice needs to come into it. And then, do you want to see EDC in there?
yeah,
Yeah, you do. Okay. So there's certainly an economic component to this. So I would want to get that perspective as well. And the charge would be along the lines of break down the relevant portions of the law and give us the fences that we have to stay within. There are some choices we have, there are some choices we don't have. The 10% petition doesn't prevent us from taking a vote on our own to referendum, so we've got that. And I think if we maintain forward progress on the conversation, we probably will be able to stay in that path and not have to worry about some other group forming and then sort of forcing the conversation a little bit faster than we're willing to as a community.
yeah, I think you have to have everybody at the table.
Yeah, I agree.
And have the opportunity to weigh in on this. On the 10% though, that is a very short window, isn't it, that you can actually,
So it goes into effect on July 21st, or July 1st of 2021, and it says if at least 10% of municipalities' electors petition for a vote to allow certain marijuana sales, it must be done at least 60 days before a regular election.
okay, so, all right, so it was just more tied to an election cycle, it wasn't a year, I couldn't remember if there was an actual, like, it had to be something within a certain window that we could go down and do stuff. So I think for our next meeting, we'll put a draft charge together and figure out how we move forward to get this going.
Jerry's rethinking his building now.
Yeah. All right, well, thank you, Catherine, I appreciate that, so. Is everybody ready to
Thanks,
move on?
Catherine.
Thanks, Catherine.
Okay, so moving on to number 19, and this is just an update on the floodplain ordinance discussions. Just a reminder to the public that because my husband and I own a property in the floodplain ordinance area that would be impacted by this, I'm recusing myself from the conversation. So I turn it over to Scott Murphy, who's acting first.
Hey. So thank you. I appreciate the turnover, Peggy. Bruce and I had an opportunity to speak with Peter Gelderman from our town attorney's office. And I think we're inviting Peter into the meeting here as we speak. Peter is going to provide us with some thoughts on ultimately what we need to do or what we have to do from a minimum perspective. And I think, some of the responses will be enlightening and helpful as we think about our course of action here. But Bruce and I, had an opportunity to go back and forth with Peter a couple times, and we've had some conversation about it. So Peter, if you don't mind, I think I'll turn it over to you to kind of lead us in the conversation. Then maybe we'll ask you some questions if that's okay.
Sure, Scott. I assume everybody can hear me, correct?
Absolutely. Sound great.
Great. And luckily, it doesn't look like you can see me because I see a black screen. So that's a good thing. Anyway, I suppose that, to summarize briefly, the existing floodplain ordinance in the town does in fact meet the requirements, meet federal requirements that are set out in FEMA regulations. So in short, there's no specific mandate that the town revise or amend its floodplain ordinance. Having said that, there's a well thought out proposal for an amendment to the ordinance that does several things. It increases the sort of it changes the requirements for base flood elevations and increases those. And it also includes what we call a look back period, or extends a look back period. There is a 1-year look back period in the current ordinance, but which means that within that 1-year period, you are allowed to make substantial improvements to your structure, to your house, as long as those improvements do not exceed 50% of the market value of that structure, of that house. So during that 1 year, you could, and if you had a house worth the building, not property, just building, worth $100,000, in a year you could do $49,999. It's actually in excess of $50,000. So you could do $50,000 worth of improvement to that house and not have to bring that house into compliance with the regulation in terms of base flood elevation. So, and that you could do that once a year, not with a year gap in between. As long as there was a year gap, you could, in 1 year, you could do another 50% under the current ordinance. If there were a look back period, then you'd be limited to that 50% within the look back period. So if it were 5 years, you could do 50% substantial improvement or 50% improvements to your property within 5 years, and then without having to bring the property into compliance. So really the purpose of the ordinance is to try to get existing structures into compliance to make them safer from flooding. The FEMA regulations do not require a look back period. So the current ordinance, as I said, satisfies the requirements of current law. There are other laws that do affect base elevations. For example, there's the building code, which the town models after the state of Connecticut building code, has a higher standard than the FEMA regs do. So anybody building new construction, for example, would have to comply with those building code requirements, which are more severe or require more freeboard or distance between the first floor and the top of I guess it's mean high, I'm not even sure if it's mean high water, but at any rate requires an additional distance of raising the first floor elevation. So that's current law in the building code. So what the FEMA reg is really aimed at, or the real effect of it, is for existing houses. And the intent of the law, at least, is to try to get those houses into compliance. The theory being that it's safer, it protects property and persons, and that's the whole purpose of FEMA law. Now, the effect on the town for having a floodplain ordinance is that the town participates in the National Flood Insurance Program. So the participation in the program, you need to have floodplain type of ordinance. You need to be in compliance with basic FEMA requirements to be eligible for the program. Madison is, If Madison increased its requirements or made them stricter, for example, it might result in some reduction in premiums for people who need to purchase flood insurance. And you should know that flood insurance is not required necessarily. If you own property on the water, there's no law that says you have to have flood insurance. Your bank, if you get a mortgage, is going to require you to have flood insurance. And as a practical matter, it probably makes sense to get flood insurance, but there's no legal requirement if you don't have a mortgage. And even that's not really a legal requirement. It's simply an underwriting requirement of any bank who's going to loan money. So there are properties without mortgages, probably on the water within the floodplain, that do not have current policies of insurance, don't have flood insurance. So the floodplain ordinance, as proposed, would strengthen or at least make the standards stricter, would change some of the requirements, bring them closer in line to the state building code. And as I said, would have a look back period that doesn't exist now. So I'm not sure if the board wants to go in any particular direction. I'd be happy to, go in that direction. I've done, by the way, just as a kind of a sidelight, every shore town in Connecticut has a floodplain ordinance. 60% or so, 65% of them regulate the floodplain, through their zoning regulations. The other 35 or 40% regulate through ordinances. Most of the towns, and I don't have an exact count on that, but most of the towns have some kind of a look back period. I would say the most popular look back period is 5 years, but some don't. And as I said, it's not required to be in compliance with the regulations.
So just to put a fine point on, Peter, what you just stated, just to kind of come back to where you started the conversation, we meet federal requirements, and
Yes.
there's no mandate legally to revise at this point for this Board of Selectmen, correct?
Correct. Any revision, as I've said to you guys, will be a policy decision, really, more than anything else.
Okay, helpful. I'll open it up to my fellow selectmen here. Any questions that you might want to ask Peter?
Yeah, I'd like to ask a question. Peter, this is Al Goldberg. You keep citing the fact that our current ordinance cites a specific revision of the building code and not the most current building code. Am I understanding that correctly?
Well, the current ordinance predates the current building code. So the provisions in the building code right now are stricter than the ordinance would require. But you have to comply with the building code. So where the ordinance kicks in is when, now keep in mind, the building code does not require existing structures to be brought current under FEMA regulations. It requires current structures and renovations and improvements and repairs to be done in accordance with the code to the extent that the code applies. But it doesn't apply, for example, to the code itself doesn't require FEMA compliance. A floodplain ordinance does. New construction, the difference really, Al, is between new construction and renovations or improvements. Any new construction would be required to meet the code, which in and of itself has a higher standard than the floodplain ordinance. So new construction would certainly be built to a higher standard than a house that was pre-existing and merely needed renovations or improvements. It's only when you reach the 50% threshold, 50% of the value of the building, that FEMA requirements will kick in.
I think I'm understanding you. Peter, I'm still trying to get to whether it would be proper and prudent for us to change the ordinance to cite the current building code as opposed to what I'm understanding is a previous revision of the building code.
Well, cite it or incorporate the standards.
He stumped you there, Hal.
Yeah, but I got to ask the question. Peter, what's your advice? Is that potentially a messy situation where we are not incorporating or referencing the most current building code?
Not necessarily. And again, it's those requirements are there for new construction. So it really it's again, it's a policy decision, Al. I hate to kind of throw it back in your direction, but strictly from a legal perspective, the ordinance as it currently exists is legal. It doesn't incorporate the standards of the current building code, but that doesn't mean the standards in the current building code don't apply. They apply, but they'll only apply for new construction. They won't apply when someone's going to renovate or make an improvement to their house unless the improvement exceeds 50% of the value of the building, at which point the new building code is going to apply. Because at that point in time, remember, at that point in time, the FEMA regulations kick in and you have to comply with the building code. When you exceed that, it's until you get to 50%, you can do improvements without complying with FEMA regulations.
But Pete, I just want to clarify, can you do if you apply for a building permit to rewire your house, can you, and you're not triggering the 50%, can you rewire to something less than the current code?
No.
Okay, so I think what you're saying is that the building code governs whatever work is done on houses, regardless of what the floodplain ordinance says or what code it references. It supersedes in that respect.
To the extent you're doing work that requires a building permit, yes. The difference simply is that all the work that you'll be doing on your house, whether it's 50% or 10%, if you need a building permit, you have to comply with the building code. But you don't have to raise the elevation of the even if you weren't planning it. In other words, you make an application to do some work. It doesn't include raising the house. The building department can't require you to raise your house until you exceed that 50% threshold, but you still have to comply with all the current code provisions.
Right. So there's two governing bodies at play here.
Yeah.
The state wants to make sure that any work done on a house is safe and up to code, and they charge the town with making sure that happens. And then the federal government is concerned about the cumulative nature of that work and has decided at 50% in the time period, within that, whatever the time period is, that then triggers the elevation of the house.
Yeah, and keep in mind, and it's important to keep in mind that the ordinance and FEMA regs only apply to existing structures. In other words, the requirement to bring a building into compliance means an existing building needs, the purpose of the FEMA regs is to get those existing buildings into compliance. They still apply to new construction, but the state building code even has a stricter requirement there. So any new construction is by definition, if it gets a building permit, is going to exceed FEMA standards. So the real purpose of FEMA is to try to bring existing structures into compliance. And that's where the substantial improvement, and that's the kind of the cutoff that the government felt was appropriate. If you're going to improve your property to the extent of more than 50% of the value of the building, hey, get yourself into compliance with the act. And that's what the floodplain ordinance does. Where towns have discretion is they can make the standards higher. they can create look-back periods. There are certain things towns can do, but right now, the ordinance that exists in Madison complies with FEMA requirements, and therefore, as a result, Madison residents are eligible to buy flood insurance because we're part of the NFIP.
So I think where this is all headed is we talked about another public hearing, bringing our current thinking out to the public and giving them a chance to react. And that's where Scott and I have been, working with Pete on this. I think it's up to us to debate now, what do we want to do? We've kind of got two paths that we can go down.
Yeah, and I think, we certainly received a thoughtful recommendation from our Coastal Resiliency Committee. So we're not, looking to discount their feedback or recommendations, but at the same token, I think we need to, listen to the public and make sure we're doing the best we possibly can for the most residents we can.
I have a question, Attorney Gelderman, with regard to the value, how the value is defined. So 50% of the value of the existing structure, is that defined somewhere? And I don't know if in your experience you've seen towns taking various approaches on how to define the value, if it's up to the discretion of the town itself.
Well, it's up to the discretion of the town how to determine market value. The standard is market value. And the probably the most accurate determination of market value is a current appraisal. But
of the building, right, Peter?
Of the building, not
Yeah.
of the whole property. So an appraiser has to, and by the way, when the assessor, does an assessment, he also breaks down land and building in an assessment. An assessment, remember, is 70% of market value. So you can extrapolate what the assessor has determined to be market value. The assessment, unless there are changes, stays the same for the period in between revaluations. So it could be 4 years old if someone looks at the assessor's records. The commentary in the FEMA regs suggests that the best way is through an appraisal. That's the most accurate method of determining the value of the building. Again, appraisers know why they're appraising property. And, look, in a case like that, a homeowner would love to see a high market value of their building. Well, the next time there's an assessment, that information is going to be available. And the homeowner may wish that they hadn't, gotten that higher market value of their building. So there's two sides to the coin, but certainly the most accurate way would be to have an appraisal. It's also it's expensive. I mean, it's, these days appraisers are charging, $1,000 to $2,000. And again, and it might be a little trickier for them to appraise the building itself because they're used to appraising the entire property. So now they have to take out the land value and figure it out from there. They'll use different methods to determine the value of a building. For example, when you're valuing an entire property, you're going to use comparable sales typically in a residential context. But when you're only doing a building, you're going to use things like replacement cost. So it's a different type of valuation that you'd use just for a building. But in terms of accuracy, it should be the most accurate method.
Perfect. Thanks, Peter. Other questions? Anybody else?
No, I think we just need to transition into what Attorney Gelderman has clearly stated as a policy decision, right? This is
on us.
Right. Forward as a matter of policy, that there is no, there is nothing compelling us to make these changes. So we need to choose a path.
I would say nothing requiring you to make the changes, as opposed to telling, I don't know, but just there's no requirement. Bruce, that's all. I mean,
Fair.
that's,
So why are there so many towns that have the 5-year look back?
well, I'm not sure why. I just think it gets properties into compliance faster. So because you're
That's the
adding
goal,
all of
right?
your improvements over a 5-year period.
Mhm.
So you'll get structures into compliance faster. So, and again, the flood rates you get credit. The more properties that are in compliance that there are, the rates will go down a little bit. It's like any insurance, it's all based on risk. So the faster properties get into compliance, the lower the rates will be. And the rates, of course, are charged to individual property owners. So, but that's just really a policy decision that those towns have made. And I think back at the beginning, and when I say the beginning, in the early days when and this is still many years ago, but FEMA used to recommend some look back periods. Then they stopped doing that, I think. I talked to some people who have been doing this for a long time, and there used to be more of almost an encouragement to have a look back period. It doesn't seem to be there anymore to that extent, at least. So certainly it's, FEMA's made it clear it's not required.
And in fact, we do have a look back period. It's just
Right.
short.
Yeah.
1 year,
Right.
yeah.
1 year, yeah. Any other questions? If not, let's sort of transition, as Bruce mentioned, into a sort of a discussion about what's next. So, you guys good? A head nod, maybe. So we're thinking about a public hearing as sort of the next step, but we would obviously need to, be prepared to have, I think, a stake in the ground for what we're thinking is, ultimately our recommendation for the public to react to. I guess, based on the conversation tonight and information from Peter, I'm sort of inclined to move us towards not making any changes at this point. Based on, our level of compliance. Now, I think there's a fine balance here, and I want to really make sure that we're thinking about this as a Board of Selectmen and being strategic, because at the end of the day, the reality is we will see 20 inches of flood level rise by the year 2050. That is the fact that I know our Coastal Resiliency Committee was thinking about and considering when putting forward their thoughtful recommendations. So I'll put it to you guys, barring Peggy. I'm pushing you aside. What do you think about putting forward a recommendation to the public, at this point, that we do not make a change? And actually, let me go one step further. Is a public hearing even needed if, in fact, we're not going to make a change?
Well, Scott, I usually speak last, but I'll speak first this time. Based on what Attorney Gelderman has shared with us tonight, it occurs to me that there's no particular interest town government has in trying to increase compliance levels. I'm not sure there's a public good here. It feels to me like it's more just paternalistic. If levels of water rise and frequency of storms increase, as scientists tell us both of those are true, then I think it's in the homeowner's best interest to make adjustments to recognize that fact. And I don't know that we need government telling them to do that. I based on my understanding tonight, I just assume that we not make any changes in our ordinance and let each individual property owner decide what they're going to do and when they're going to do it. I don't see why town government needs to be beating them with a stick, trying to get them to do it. It's their own property that they need to protect and think about. And I think they can do that better than town government can. So my reaction at this point is I don't see a need to make any changes.
So I'm gonna agree, and I'm going to add in that one of the things that's troubled me from the start of this is the impact on homes that historically have not been in the floodplain, that are of much more modest size and owned by people of much more modest means, where faced with the normal maintenance on their home, will trigger this elevation mandate, and they won't be able to afford it. And their choice will be either to not do anything to their home or to sell it because they can't afford to maintain it. And I don't think that that is a position that we should be putting homeowners in. I think until the federal government follows through, maybe with assistance and grants to homeowners, elevate, that we need to just stay the course where we're at. I mean, I think we can appreciate that the CRC presented a money no object best practice strategy, but money is an object at the end of the day, and not everybody can have the resources to comply with this. So far, I think that the three of us have landed. Aaron, we haven't heard from you yet.
I don't, it's tough because the Coastal Resiliency Committee presented to us so long ago. So I'm trying to sort of remember what their arguments were for changing the ordinance. Because I feel like they were asked to provide a recommendation or to look into this issue, and they felt pretty strongly about it. I mean, I do think that we are in compliance, so certainly there's no reason to change it from that standpoint. So I guess I'm kind of I'm a little on the fence about it, I guess.
Aaron, would it help if we heard from the Coastal Resiliency Commission once more as to why they
well, that's what
did?
I was thinking about that. I don't know if it's worthwhile if you all have already kind of come to your conclusions, and I could go back myself and do a little bit of that. If that's the case, I don't want to waste everybody else's time here.
I wouldn't mind hearing from them again, Aaron.
And so maybe the right way to hear from them is in the context of the public hearing. And Scott, the need for the public hearing is again to solicit all points of view. I'm guessing that those advocates for no change will be very, very happy. I'm guessing that the advocates for change will try to make their case again in a public forum.
So could we have, from a process standpoint, could we have the Coastal Resiliency Committee actually do a presentation during the public hearing? Why not, right? Okay, I'm on board.
Why not?
I think that's a great idea.
Perhaps we could present them with some specific questions too.
Yeah, and I think that we're giving sort of a balanced attack. I think there's one other just point that I wanted to bring up that, Bruce, you and I were sort of picking at with Peter a little bit, which is if in fact the state goes to BFE +2, my understanding is our ordinance just ends up pointing to that. So ultimately we'll keep the 1-year look back, but we would move directly to BFE +2 anyways. Is that, Peter, can you confirm that just so that we're thinking about that the right way?
Well, for new construction, yes. And for anything that's in excess of 50%, yes.
So in 6 months, if the state moves to BFE +2, we would just move right there with them. So in theory, it could happen automatically. It's just not the town doing it. It's the state doing it.
Right, in terms of the building code.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's correct. But again, keep in mind that that's for new construction or when someone is over the threshold of
About
50%.
50%, right?
That's when they have to start complying. And you'll have to comply with the state building code then, because you won't be able to do your work without getting a building permit. So.
All right. Well, shall we at least just, think about scheduling our public hearing, and we can, I don't know if we can take this offline, Lauren. I don't know how the whole magic of your office works, but if you can magically make a public hearing work, that would be fantastic.
Sounds good.
All right.
Okay.
I officially bring it back to you, Peggy.
All right. No, I mean, I think, given it is, I think coastal resiliency isn't even meeting in July, so this might be an August or September kind of public hearing possibly, and it sounds like if the board is leaning towards not making any changes, there's no rush to schedule it, but something could be organized for them, later in the summer. All right, so moving on to next item on the agenda is discuss and take action to approve routine line item transfers totaling $165,183.94.
So moved.
Second.
All right, any questions? This is routine to close out the year. All in favor, say aye.
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 Great, okay. Item number 21, discuss and take action to approve incorporating an administrative assistant health coordinator position into the ARP funding schedule in the amount of $24,245.52.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, great. So this is basically the position we talked about at our last meeting, and as part of our kind of, mini ARP funding approval that we did, that would have brought us to a total of roughly $99,000, I think. And I know some board members, Bruce and Aaron particularly, just wanted to look into it a little bit more, get their questions answered. Any other discussion on this item?
No, so I think we got a really good explanation of Deb on the background to this. I think, the concerns that I have as a matter of principle that, we're creating a permanent position from temporary money is something that we just need to be transparent about with the public, that this is a position that we need. And we've got money available, but at some point that money will go away and we'll be looking to fund it with tax dollars.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
This is just approving 1 year for that position. Any other discussion on it?
I'm incredibly supportive.
I just wanted to provide to share some information for the public, because it was helpful to me. I share Bruce's concern that that this position.
Could you tell the birds to quiet down, Aaron, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. Is essential, and therefore we need to be planful from a budget perspective on how we are going to continue to fund it. One of the questions I had was about, there wasn't a lot of really discussion or explanation of how the position fit within the guidelines of the ARP. But I was able to get, particularly because there's a very significant emphasis that this position is going to be dedicated to responding to the COVID public health emergency. And there's a lot of other language in there, but I was able to get some clarification that that this person would be working on that type of, or would have this type of focus. So given that information that was provided by Deb, I feel comfortable that we're in an okay spot to use the funds for this purpose.
Okay, great. I'm glad you got your questions answered. So all in favor of approving the motion, say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstain? Everybody voted? Okay, great. Okay, good. All right, great. On to the next. Discuss applications received under Town of Madison Incentive Assessment Deferral Program, Tax Incentive Assessment Deferral Program Policy. You guys have hung in there.
Oh, we're not taking action?
No, because they haven't even presented, and we still need the assessor's office to kind of walk us through what it means, these applications and stuff. Just so the public's benefit, the Board of Selectmen had approved back in 2018 a tax incentive program at the recommendation of the Economic Development Commission, and basically just trying to incentivize and encourage new businesses to come to Madison, new construction, or create greater vibrancy in our community. And so our board reviewed that policy. It's a Board of Selectmen policy. We reviewed it, I think it was last September or something like that. We made some refinements to it. And now we actually have 2 applicants to receive those tax incentives. So this is a new policy for the town. And so it's something that, will be a little bit of a learning process for all of us, I think, in terms of what projects qualify and how this process would work. So I thought that the first best thing to do was start out with meeting 2 of the applicants and let them walk through their projects so the public understands. Ultimately, this is something that would go to town meeting. So if the Board of Selectmen approves it, it would be sent to town meeting for a vote for the public ultimately, because this is providing basically a tax abatement for property owners over a limited period of time on projects that they're starting. So with that, I think first up is you're first up. So now, do you have a presentation that we should be sharing, or are you just going to talk about your application?
I was just planning to talk about it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay, great.
I think our application is contained in.
Yeah, we got a whole
PDF
packet.
that was sent
Exactly.
out.
So, and maybe if you want to talk about it, I can pull up maybe and share anything specific if you want. Okay?
Sure. Yeah, that sounds good.
Great.
So first, a little background. My name's Dave Milano from Milano Development. We've been building in Madison and along the shoreline for 50 years or so, a couple generations at this point. And we have several commercial properties in Madison currently that we've built over the years. A lot of warehouse space, storage space, flex space, some office space, all in the commercial realm. And specifically, this project that we've applied for is at 175 Fort Path Road. And what we're building here, it's similar to a lot of what we've done in the past and a lot of our current properties, in that, it's commercial space. We rent to a lot of small businesses, almost all small businesses, really, a lot of local people. And, it generates some jobs, a place for local people to house their businesses as opposed to going to adjacent towns or even further away, and provide local services to the community. So the property 175 Fort Path Road, it's a 5-building complex, and we kind of, for purposes of the tax incentive application, we've divided it into a couple phases. So the first I really started discussing this policy was back in October of 2019. I approached Dave Anderson, who filled me in on some of the details. At that point, we had already started our first building in the complex. It's a 12,000 square foot commercial building, and learned a little bit about the policy. And at that point, we were already, far enough along with that policy with that building that it didn't really make much sense to, apply for tax incentives. The horse was already out of the barn. But that's phase 1, the 12,000 square foot building. Phase 2 encompasses the 12,000 square foot building we're currently building, and 15,000 square footer and 3,000 or 4,000 square feet of additional building that we're planning on putting up. And the reason why I'm kind of going through the timing of all this is that we submitted our application for this policy on March 10th, 2020, which was after we built our first building, phase 1, prior to, building the second building or even getting building permits or even having final plans for the second building. And of course, March 2020 is when the world stopped. And, that affected us in this application in a couple different ways. Number one, we stopped along with everybody else because nobody really knew, if the world was going to collapse or not. And thankfully, we've come out of it in some ways better than we thought. And the second effect that it has on this application is that the big hangup for proceeding on the town's end was the ability to hold a town meeting to vote on the application, which I know I was in touch with the town, and I know there was some things in the press about the ability to hold town meetings, and it kept getting pushed, kicked down the road for obvious and good reasons. But in terms of timing, so at a certain point, we decided to go ahead with it, and we did so. As it's a spec building, so as we're building this, we're taking risks, weighing several factors on if we should build or not build. And at the time, I looked through the policy, the tax incentive policy again, and I was pretty encouraged that it's a formula-based policy. There are pretty objective criteria for approving a project under the policy, and we proceeded partly under the strong assumption that we would apply and be approved for such a policy. And of course, I realize there's a procedure to go through, and it's not an ironclad assumption, but at a certain point, I figured if we don't qualify for this, I'm not really sure who does, because we meet a lot of the criteria. And I think our decision-making process throughout this process illustrates the value of a tax incentive policy. So, for example, especially building on spec, which means, to the layperson, means you don't have tenants lined up, guaranteed income lined up. So you're weighing risks, you're running numbers, trying to figure out if it makes sense to build. In our particular case, we have a lot of other buildings in Madison. So, probably the time we submitted this application last March, we probably had 10 or 20,000 square feet of empty space in our existing buildings. So does it make sense to build a new building? You weigh that factor. Of course, we made the decision to proceed, but there's a couple of decision points along the way. That was the first decision point. The world was kind of coming out of things in the summer, but the byproduct of that is that building materials and lumber suddenly skyrocketed. So we poured a foundation last September. We then paused, decided that we want to frame this building and spend double or triple what we spent on the previous building. And again, we're looking at things like a tax incentive policy to try to prop up this, even though costs are going up on this end. So it's a valuable policy in a couple of different ways for a project like ours, and I'm sure other projects, whether it's a developer who's familiar with being in town, existing developer, somebody looking to come to town, it's not a no-brainer to put up these buildings and do these projects. So the numbers are all in the application, the assumptions as far as assessed value and square footages and timelines. I guess I would say is that pushing this along with the tax incentive policy, that we're not gonna we're committed to Madison, so we'd like to keep building. And the tax incentive policy, number one, affects the pace at which we build. We've gone through periods of time in Madison where we built a lot. My dad built a lot of buildings in the 80s, and you could probably take a period from the mid-90s to the mid-teens where we didn't put up more than 20,000 square feet of space, and all that was self-storage over a 20-year period. So it's the type of thing we're committed, and we'd like to build. And the way the policy's been structured, it gives the incentive on the town side is that if a builder is nudged to build a project, sure, they get some incentives up front, but the town is getting this tax revenue forever. So even if you're nudging a builder to build a building a few years ahead of time, the town's going to make that up even in the initial years, and then after that, receive 100% assessment on the property forever. And that's one example. The other example is simply attracting somebody to town to build a project that might not get built, if there was no policy in place. So that's a little bit of the rationale and a little bit of the timeline and a little bit of the background on the project. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
I think, just so I understand, so phase one is done. and you're applying for phase 2. There's also a phase 3? Or are you applying, are you kind of lumping
Yeah,
phase
so-
2 and 3 together as
yeah,
one
so-
project?
Yeah, I think the easiest way to think about it is phase 1 is the building that's completed. Phase 2 encompasses the next 3 buildings,
Okay.
which are all contained under one tax incentive
Okay,
application.
and some of those buildings you started construction on and others are waiting.
Yeah, one building,
Okay.
we've started construction.
And I'm kind of familiar with your office park, so there are a lot of small businesses in them, right? Is that typically who you, it's not, like, when I hear a lot of times people hear storage facilities, they think like it's somebody's, garage space or whatever.
Mhm.
So, are you, most of your tenants active business providers in the community?
Yeah, so we have a couple different types of space. We have self-storage, which we have very little of that in this particular project, just a couple thousand square feet out of the 40 some odd thousand. So the vast majority of this is small business flex space. To give you an example, the building that, in phase 1 that's already up, it's a 12,000 square foot building. And it's unitized. There's 11 different units in the building, which, are 11 small businesses. Some businesses take more than one unit, but just to give you an idea of the economic activity, you drive through there on the average weekday, you probably have, 20 cars in the parking lot, mostly employees or owner operators within the complex.
So just a little
Yeah.
personal story. Our business was started in one of these buildings in Orchard Park. In one of those early 80s buildings, and we started off in 5,000 square feet, and then we took the unit next to it, and we just kept growing until we went to ask your father to move out of his unit, and he said no, and then we went into the back building. And so, this was a business that started from scratch, and by the time it was too big for that space, it probably employed 75 people. So you never know what any one business is going to do, but it does provide that easy entry for businesses, and they may outgrow it, they may never outgrow it, but I think it's good to have those businesses in Madison and encourage those owner operators to be in Madison and run their businesses here.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things you'd like to hear recurringly from people in the community is just struggling to find space. Everybody wants to have their business here, but they have a hard time finding space to run their business in Madison. It's not an easy place, right, to find space. So that's why I was kind of trying to understand the mix of this, because I haven't looked at the actual design, but this is really kind of that type of industrial park.
Yeah, that's our target market, for sure.
Okay. Any other questions from board members on this? I think what we would intend on doing is at our July meeting, we would actually vote on this, but I think I want the assessor and the finance department to come in and just talk a little bit about what does it mean to the tax rolls, right? What are the benefits, and talk about that process also. And then
Great idea.
we'll have real numbers to put to it and understand it a little bit better. But now,
and we've talked about this in the past, it probably bears repeating at every opportunity that at no time in either of these projects will our tax rolls be getting smaller. We're simply managing the rate at which the tax roll is going to increase over, I think both of these projects are 5-year amortizations, right?
Ours would be, for sure. I think ours would be.
Yours is a 10 or 7?
Probably 7.
Right. So the property would never pay less than what it currently pays in its current state. And as your projects are completed, each one would then start its own clock. So if I recall from the EDC meeting, the proposal is that one phase gets completed, the clock starts on that phase. Then when the next phase is completed, there's a clock starting on that phase. So even though you're bringing everything to us all at once, it's not like you have to wait until you're done with everything to start that.
well, and that's some of the things I think it's important to talk to, how that would work in terms of assessor standpoint, and because we had a little bit of discussion about that today, how that would work, and what mechanisms would be required by them, and so since it's first time we've done this, so we want to make sure we do it right and set up proper policies and procedures about how these things would be worked out and start applying and what the timeline would look like. So we'll have that as part of the discussion at our next meeting. Okay, so thank you for joining us. Unless anybody else has questions for Dave? No? Okay, great. All right, thank you very much. Appreciate it. And now we have number 2 applicant. So, do you want me to put any of your pictures up? Because I have them all like in a PDF. I can just throw them up there if you want.
I wasn't going to go through the specifics of the building, unless you want me to.
Go ahead and
so my name is Jerry Davis from Davis Realty. Nice to be here in person tonight. Our project is on Bradley Road, 110 Bradley Road. We call it Bradley, and it is planned as a 30-unit rental apartment building. This is kind of our main business. We have Clippership Row and Madison and apartments there, and so this is a kind of the next phase for what we're planning on that property. We've owned the property since, I think, 2009, and you may ask what took so long. And I ask myself that a lot. Over the years that we've been working on this, we tried a lot of different ideas for projects on this site. We were looking at office, mixed use, medical, hotel. We looked at everything. The biggest obstacle that we were battling that entire time is septic capacity, because it's in Madison and it's all septic, and the locally managed limit to septic capacity was 5,000 gallons per day, which translates into a certain density, and we could never make the numbers work. In 2018, 2 things changed, which have brought us to this point. And the big thing that changed was Connecticut changed its law that allowed more septic flow on our site than had previously been allowed when it's managed by the Department of Public Health. So it could be a simple, conventional septic system that we know and love. And that allowed us to suddenly get more density onto that site. The other thing that changed in 2018 was you created this tax incentive. So after all these years of looking at our pro formas and trying to figure out how to make these numbers work, suddenly with those 2 changes, the wheels started turning, and then we started working on this concept for this building. And that's pretty much, how we got there here today. We had like Dave, a big delay last year with COVID, where our architects and engineers basically shut down, and so our whole application got pushed back until now. So now we're dealing with, like many people, much higher building costs. So those tax incentives are, I would say, considerably more important now than they were even before. So our project, in our opinion, checks all the boxes this policy asks. It's a major investment. The current assessment of the property is about $460,000. We estimate that when completed, this property's assessment will be in the $4 million range, and that's a conservative estimate. I actually expect it will be higher. So it's going to increase the assessment of that property by 10 times or more. So, there you go. There you go. There it is. Thank you. So, again, I'm here because in large part of this tax incentive program made our finances work. And I would also add that in the opinion of the banks that we're talking to for financing, this tax incentive is a significant piece of what we need to make the numbers work, especially to get it stabilized in the first few years. Now, the way the policy works when we appear before you to talk about this after we've gotten our planning and zoning, after the building is designed, engineered. We're in a funny position, and we've spent, a lot of money to get to this point. So we're sort of in a weak position asking for this tax incentive. And I think in a lot of ways, we're in an even weaker position because, Davis Realty is totally in Madison. We operate nowhere else. Our whole business is here. Our apartments, we're committed to the town. We're committed to keeping things like the movie theater open. I mean, this is where we are. So we're not going anywhere. So it's funny to be here asking for this, but it is what the policy is intended to encourage. And that's why I wanted to talk about something else, which is talking about this policy and presenting this to you tonight. I think it's important not to just focus on our project, but also to focus on the fact that, as you say, this is the first project or the first projects going through this process. And I can tell you that business people in this area and beyond this area are watching this process take place, and they want to see how it works. And you have a project that checks all the boxes for what the tax incentive policy is intended to encourage. They want to see that the town follows through on delivering that. And it was unanimously passed by EDC and by the Selectmen, and people want to know that Madison will be open for business. And I think this is especially important when we have RFPs out there and we want to see more people submit proposals for those things. We have big issues like schools, Highland Avenue and Academy. I served on the Academy committee during the survey phase, and we were looking at RFPs from developers who were eager to go forward. And whether or not those should have gone forward, our process didn't sit well with those developers. I think Madison needs to do better in terms of how it's perceived by the business community. Ryan Kess, who's the chairman of the EDC, talked about this incentive last year as a great marketing tool for the town. I think he's really right. And he talked about how it shows that Madison is sticking with the state statutes. And some people may not realize that the tax incentive is a state, it exists by virtue of the state statute, that many, many towns, including some of our neighboring towns, have tax incentive programs like this. And for Madison, we need to think competitively about the other towns, and we want to be an attractive place for investment. And I think this tax incentive policy is a huge step in that direction. So I just wanted to make that point, and I appreciate your time. I would ask you to take action as soon as you can, because at least for us, time is of the essence. At this point, because we are dealing with lenders right now, and this is a big part of our program. And that's the end of my words.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. I mean, it's, I just, to the public, this is what the Bradley will look like. And I will say it is a little transformative to that street compared to what it is today, right?
Yeah.
So it's certainly, it would be a great addition. And fits in with the sight lines of Bradley Road with the hub thing and everything. But any questions from the board on this project? And I think the plan would just be, like I said, I think we take both of these, we'll come back, have a discussion with actual numbers so we understand, what the impact would be to the tax rolls and what the benefit would look like for developers, and then we would vote on this at our next meeting in July. So then
our vote would be to send it to town meeting.
And then we would send it to town meeting. And Lauren, what's the time frame from a Board of Selectmen vote to a town meeting? She probably fell asleep.
So- It's the same time frame for the town, for the public hearing. It's 10 days in the newspaper before it's held. However, town meeting has more moving parts. We would have to confirm with the registrars their availability, for the case of a quorum being met.
Okay. Oh, right, okay, so if we were to vote on this, and maybe this is something we might wanna consider for the special meeting, adding to the agenda, because that'll be earlier than our, July 19th meeting right now. So, we may be having a special meeting before that, and then, because now you've got a timeline that puts us in August, I guess, okay, so just so you understand this.
Yeah, and there's also a Board of Finance meeting, I believe, as part of the process.
Dave, is that,
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, Jerry's right about that.
So, and their meeting is actually, so it is good that we would do this in the earlier part of July.
Yeah, because I think you have to
Yeah.
refer to the Board of
Yeah, we have
Finance.
to
they have
refer,
to
and
refer to
then, but we send to town meeting, right, the Board of Finance approval. Yeah,
Right,
yeah,
so we do all the groundwork, we
Yeah.
give them the opportunity to weigh in on it. I can't imagine that we would find really any opposition, but we need to give them the opportunity.
Yeah, so they're, just trying to think, their meeting is, yeah, that's the 21st. So actually, we could do this on the 19th for a special meeting. The 21st is the Board of Finance meeting in July. So that would set a town meeting in August. Okay? No, that's not ideal. Although even if we voted tonight, it would still have to wait till the next meeting, so.
And just
So,
for everybody watching, this has been through all of the other commissions that it needs to go through. These are not, this is the end of the journey for you, not the beginning of the journey.
Right, exactly.
Okay, all right, thank you both very much, okay? So we'll keep it moving forward.
Thank you.
Okay, so, all right,
I didn't see any refunds.
I didn't see anything in there either. Any more citizens' comments?
We do have one person with their hand raised. I will allow them to talk. You go ahead and state your name and address for the record.
Thank you so much. This is Karen Lucibello Daigle. I'm at 328 County Road over in North Madison. Great to see you guys. I just wanted to ask about, I'm sorry if that was Davis Realty or Mr. Davis. I'm sorry if I didn't pick that up, but I was just wondering if that design on Bradley is there any way, I'm not trying to be a pain, I'm just curious, is there any way that could be softened up into a more, I don't know, not historical look, but maybe it just seems very metropolitan looking to me. Is that the final design? Is I guess what I'm asking, and that's my only question, and thank you so much.
So just so Mr. Davis did leave, so he's not here to answer specifically, but this has gone through the Planning and Zoning Commission. So anything related to the design or anything, I think you could ask, you could email an inquiry to the Planning and Zoning Chair, Ron Clark.
Or directly to Davis Realty, I would think.
Peggy,
Yes.
if I could jump in and say something. So the Planning and Zoning Commission process, the project has been approved and it went through multiple rounds of architectural review with both the Planning and Zoning Commission and the Advisory Committee on Community Appearance. So the building will be constructed as shown unless Jerry chooses to make modifications to bring that back to the Planning and Zoning Commission. So.
Okay, great. So hopefully there's your answer. And if you have specific things, you can always reach out directly to Davis Realty on comments on the design. Any other members of the public, Lauren?
That's it.
Okay, can I get a motion to adjourn?
Good.
All right, have a good night.
Bye, guys.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you, bye-bye.